bitter mountain leaf sparked wars, built empires, fueled revolutions, and conquered nearly every culture on Earth. From sacred ceremonies to global addiction, tea's unbelievable journey shaped religion, trade, colonization, espionage, and modern civilization itself. Tea is everywhere. Seriously, everywhere. On freezing Himalayan mountains, Sherpas start mornings with butter tea for luck and survival. In Morocco, pouring mint tea is a gesture of respect. In Japan, tea became spiritual discipline. In Ireland, it's breakfast. In Russia, it's conversation. And somehow, one simple leaf ended up connecting almost every culture on Earth. And this is the weird part. Tea isn't just a drink. It became ritual, identity, comfort, survival. Back in the 1800s, writer Isabella Beeton called it a necessity of life. And honestly, she wasn't exaggerating. Today, we drink it as bubble tea, milk tea, sweet tea, iced tea, matcha, yak butter tea, thousands of versions from one single plant. Now, according to Chinese mythology, tea wasn't discovered by accident. It was discovered by a god.
Drinking tea in China has a very long history. Do you know the legend of Shennong?
No.
This is really interesting. Shennong, whose name means the divine farmer, the legend says that one fall afternoon, he decided to take a break. He sat down under a camellia tree, and he was boiling a pot of water to drink. Well, some of the leaves fell from the tree into the water and infused that water with those leaves. He looked at it, he smelled it, he thought, wow, this smells beautiful. So he took a sip, and he found it very refreshing. Well, since his discovery, people all over the world love drinking tea.
His name was Shennong, half man, half dragon, a ruler with transparent skin who could literally watch how plants affected the human body after eating them, which sounds insane, but that detail becomes important later. One day, Shennong tested dozens of poisonous plants while traveling through the wilderness, and eventually, his body started shutting down. He collapsed beside a pot of boiling water, almost dead. Then suddenly, leaves from a nearby tree drifted into the water. He drank it and recovered instantly. That moment changed everything. The mysterious leaf became medicine, energy, and eventually legend. And Shennong himself would forever be remembered as the first god of tea. But here's the twist nobody talks about. For thousands of years, ancient China didn't actually have a separate word for tea. The word was tu, and it basically meant any bitter herbal drink boiled in water. So when old texts mentioned tea, they were often talking about completely different plants, flowers, herbs, roots, even medicinal weeds. Real tea came from something much more specific, a plant called Camellia sinensis, and its true origins weren't in the great Chinese capitals people imagine. They were deep in the jungles and mountains of Yunnan and Xishuangbanna, near modern Myanmar. And back then, nobody was drinking it casually. Tea wasn't a beverage yet, it was food. This next part feels surprisingly modern. Tea's earliest cultures didn't brew elegant drinks. Instead, people packed tea into bamboo tubes and buried it underground to ferment because raw leaves were bitter and difficult to eat. Fermentation softened the flavor while adding nutrition, probiotics, and energy for mountain communities stretching from Myanmar to Assam. This tradition still survives today in Myanmar's famous Lepet Thok tea leaf salad. Around 141 BC, archaeologists found real tea inside the tomb of Han Dynasty Emperor Liu Qi, proving tea had entered elite Chinese civilization. Yet tea still wasn't consumed like a modern beverage. It was cooked into soups, porridges, and herbal mixtures that resembled medicine more than refreshment. Farmers in Sichuan slowly expanded cultivation, helping tea spread beyond the mountains where it originally grew wild. As Mahayana Buddhism expanded through China, monks rejected alcohol and excess, creating space for tea to become central to spiritual life. Tea kept monks awake during meditation, encouraged focus, and supported discipline. Monasteries across China soon served tea daily, connecting the drink with simplicity, mindfulness, and self-control. Then came Lu Yu, the orphan boy who transformed tea forever. Raised in a monastery, he hated the harsh tea porridge served there and eventually wandered across China. During his travels, he finally experienced tea prepared simply with leaves and water. Inspired, Lu Yu spent decades studying tea before writing the Jing, the classic of tea. His work elevated tea from ordinary consumption into philosophy, art, and identity. Tea houses spread rapidly across China, and Lu Yu became celebrated as the god of tea. Tea ceremonies soon became symbols of presence and calm. Every movement mattered, from pouring to waiting to sharing conversation. Buddhist monks later carried tea into Japan and Korea, where both cultures reshaped it. In Japan, monk Eisai introduced powdered green tea, now known as matcha, inspiring the disciplined ritual of chado. Korea embraced darye, a softer tradition focused on humility and simplicity. By the 11th century, tea had also become a major trading commodity through the Himalayan tea horse road. Compressed tea bricks traveled across freezing mountain passes in exchange for war horses. Over time, producers discovered oxidation created entirely new varieties, including black tea, oolong, green tea, white tea, and pu'er. During the Ming Dynasty, brick tea declined, and loose-leaf brewing flourished, encouraging the rise of delicate teapots, refined tea sets, and the elegant tea culture that still shapes traditions across Asia today. Now, you'd think Europe would instantly fall in love with tea. They didn't. When Portuguese and Dutch traders first encountered it, many thought it was just bitter leaf water. In fact, one Russian diplomat literally rejected a shipment because he couldn't understand why anyone needed dead leaves. But in 1610, Dutch merchants delivered tea into Amsterdam, and slowly curiosity spread. And this is actually why the world uses different names today. Land routes from China spread cha, or chai. Sea routes controlled by Dutch traders spread tea, same drink, different journey, and then Britain entered the story, and everything escalated fast. Tea first appeared inside London coffee houses during the 1600s, but the real turning point came when Portuguese Princess Catherine of Braganza married King Charles II. She adored tea, and suddenly English nobility copied her. Soon after noon, tea became fashionable across Britain. The East India Company gained monopoly control over imports, and massive shipments started arriving from China. Tea mixed with sugar became addictive for British society. Honestly, the country became obsessed almost overnight. But obsession created problems. Tea taxes became ridiculously expensive under the East India Company monopoly, so smugglers flooded England with illegal tea from Dutch traders. Meanwhile, Britain forced taxes onto the American colonies without giving them representation in Parliament. And eventually, people snapped. In 1773, colonists stormed British ships in Boston Harbor and dumped thousands of pounds of tea into the water. The Boston Tea Party became one of the sparks that ignited the American Revolution. Imagine that for a second. Tea helped start a war for independence.
Chinese exports like silk, ceramic, and tea were hugely popular in Britain. Opium was one of the few things that British Empire could trade back.
But somehow, tea history gets even darker. Britain was buying enormous amounts of Chinese tea, but China only accepted silver in return. Eventually, Britain started running out of money, so the East India Company found another product to trade: opium grown in colonial India. The results were catastrophic. Millions in China became addicted. The Chinese government cracked down, seized opium shipments, and Britain responded with naval warfare. The Opium Wars forced China into humiliating treaties, including surrendering Hong Kong to Britain, all because the empire wanted more tea. Britain realized depending on China for tea was dangerous, so they hired a Scottish botanist named Robert Fortune to steal tea secrets directly from China. Fortune disguised himself as a Chinese merchant, traveled through forbidden regions, and secretly collected tea plants, seeds, and production knowledge. Then he smuggled everything back to India. But that wasn't all he discovered. Some Chinese exporters were adding toxic chemicals to preserve green tea color for foreign buyers. Britain exposed the scandal publicly, and suddenly, Indian tea became the future. Tea plantations exploded across Assam and Darjeeling almost immediately, but behind the beautiful hills was brutal exploitation. Hundreds of thousands of laborers worked under harsh indentured contracts that trapped families in poverty. Conditions became so bad that rebellion spread across India in 1857. Still, the British doubled down. Tea plantations expanded into Sri Lanka, Kenya, Vietnam, Indonesia, and East Africa. And for the first time in history, tea became a truly global industrial product. Ironically, most Indians still didn't even like British black tea, so sellers adapted. They mixed strong tea with local spices, milk, and sugar, cardamom, ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and suddenly everything changed. Masala chai was born. The drink exploded in popularity because it felt familiar while still carrying caffeine and energy. And honestly, this one invention influenced tea culture everywhere. Malaysian teh tarik, Thai tea, sweet milk teas, they all trace part of their story back to this moment. By the 20th century, tea had evolved into hundreds of identities. Earl Grey appeared in Britain with bergamot oil. Morocco embraced mint tea. Turkey became one of the world's biggest tea-drinking nations. Russia built entire social traditions around samovars and tea gatherings. America created sweet tea, iced tea, and eventually tea bags. Japan turned matcha into desserts and ice cream. Taiwan introduced bubble tea in the 1980s. And suddenly tapioca pearls and milk tea conquered global cities almost overnight. Tea just kept reinventing itself. Today, the world drinks over 5 billion cups of tea every single day. Tea shows up in skincare, desserts, soft drinks, candies, perfumes, and even household products. Global production now exceeds 6.7 million metric tons annually, which honestly feels impossible to even imagine. And tea became part of language itself. Not my cup of tea. Spill the tea. Storm in a teacup. One ancient mountain leaf somehow embedded itself into everyday human life across nearly every culture on Earth. From Himalayan monasteries to Boston Harbor, tea transformed from fermented survival food into history's most influential beverage. It inspired spirituality, fueled empires, launched wars, and connected civilizations across continents. Whether called tea, chai, or cha, humanity's favorite drink remains one of history's greatest stories ever brewed.